Well, we always welcome a thoughtful conversation on policy and issues. The Second Amendment is a bedrock within our Constitution, along with the First Amendment. And these rights must be protected. But we also are listening to, we heard yesterday, a number of these Republican senators, many of them saying that they support the Second Amendment. They are gun owners and hunters and sportsmen themselves. But the bump stock, I know that this is something that many legislators have been telling us, and I've read publicly, that they had never even heard of the device before, and they're in Congress. So many of them are open to a conversation.
The massacre in Vegas is renewing that debate about gun control in this country. This morning, we are continuing that conversation with our bipartisan panel. We have so many wonderful people here with a lot of experience. So, Darren, I'll start with you because you've served our country, U.S. Army veteran, former NYPD officer. He's on the back row, Darren Porcher. Now, Steve Scalise came out and said he does not support more gun control. He was shot on the baseball field. He says he wants more gun rights. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a strong proponent for the Second Amendment, and I don't believe gun control is the panacea or the answer to this. We have to look, this is a much broader issue. And so going back, just taking consideration, Scalise, he was just shot by someone, and he still maintained his ground on being a firm gun or Second Amendment advocate. I truly believe it's the people, it's not the guns. You need an individual that pulls the trigger. It's not the firearm itself. And there's been this conversation over the bump stock. I can make a semi-automatic weapon fully automatic just by getting into it and changing up the configuration. Mm-hmm. So whether it's the bump stock or whatever you choose to introduce, that's not the issue. It's a people.
Let me see a show of hands. Who is for more gun control? You are. Okay, you're in the front. Tiffany Salabarius. She is a disaster relief responder and is part of Dynamic Life Ministries. Tell me why you want more gun control.
You know what, Ainsley? I know you know my husband, Pastor Demas.
Such a nice guy.
Unfortunately, his sister was at this concert. So this really hit home personally. And she had to dodge bullets and made it out safely, and we're thankful for that. But it is unconscionable that we live in a country where this terrorist was able to amass this amount of an arsenal. And it comes a time when what is legal is no longer moral. Our country has made significant changes in reaction to things that were once legal that are no longer moral.
But what about what Darren says? It's the person that's pulling the trigger.
Because we can't play God and make sure that we no longer live in a fallen world because we don't live in paradise. I think it's a bit of a cop-out to say, oh, well, you know, it's not the guns. We cannot allow homegrown terrorists to be enabled with our laws to legally amass arsenals, militias in their homes to this extent.
Right behind you is Kelly McCain. He's a Marine veteran. Thank you for serving our country. Special missions officer. The number of guns he has, what do you think about gun control? He had a lot of guns. He's changing them from semi-automatic to automatic. Do you agree with some of these politicians, even some Republicans that say no more bump stocks?
Like I said earlier, Ainsley, bump stock, flash hider, forend, whatever it is, there's always these buzzwords after these things, right? That's not the issue. As far as the number of guns, the only thing that came to my mind was that a person that buys that many weapons over that short a period of time might be suspected of doing strawman purchases. That's an awful lot of weapons in a short period of time. But at the end of the day, there are collectors here in the U.S. Do I personally think it's strange? Yeah, a little bit. But then I also think of weapons as shovels. I mean, they're, tools of the trade. They're not coveted items.
Right.
But it is his right to have them, so...
Rachel, sitting next to you in the pink, Fox News contributor and a mother. As a mom, how do you explain this to your kids? I talked to one of the first responders earlier on the show. He said he was next to someone who was younger than him, in his early 20s, and he watched him change from a flesh color to blue. He watched him die right in front of him.
Yeah. It's a very difficult subject. It's interesting. I think the right would be open to, conservatives would be open to sensible gun control if they didn't feel like the left was always, don't let any crisis go to waste, or really masters of incrementalism. I look at what Hillary Clinton said, that conservatives and Republicans are complicit in this act. And I think about how Democrats have said since the last election that they want to win back working working class Americans. And, you know, whether it's the flag or gun culture, I see no interest in them understanding where that culture and trying and again going and blaming them for some psycho because we care about the Second Amendment right, I think is wrong, and it shows that they're not interested in understanding.
That was a message to your husband, who's a congressman. Yeah, let's listen to Hillary Clinton last night. She was on Jimmy Fallon. Listen to this soundbite and I'll get your reaction.
I can't believe that one whole political party in the greatest country on earth is totally sold to the gun lobby. The vast majority of Americans and the vast majority of gun owners know we need common sense gun safety measures.
Zaino, who's right here on the front row, she's a political science professor at IANA. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about Hillary Clinton's comments from a political science perspective?
You know, I think the research shows that, sure, we can have a discussion of common sense gun regulation, as Rachel just mentioned. I think most of us would say we're open to the idea of talking about that. Mm-hmm. But I think we sell this entire issue short when we focus just on the law. We have to look at the reality. And I point people over to Switzerland. They have a gun culture similar to ours, a much smaller country, and they have far less of these mass shootings. In fact, they haven't had one since 2001.
Why is
because
that?
They do a much better job teaching young people social responsibility, having a sense of community and family. And we had talked about this earlier. This is a complex issue. It involves issues of mental health. Sure, it involves issues of gun regulation. It also involves teaching social responsibility to our young people. If you're going to have a Second Amendment right to bear arms, which under Heller the Supreme Court said we do, then you darn well better teach people to use those responsibly. And we don't do that. So we have to have a real discussion. I would tell my Democratic friends, you pass all of these laws you want today, and nothing is going to change because these shootings didn't occur as a result of that. So you have to have a broader discussion. This involves issues of employment, of the way that people are treated in society, of community. And we sell ourselves short when we have this narrow discussion after each one of these horrific events.
Deneen Borelli, right here on the front row in the blue dress, Fox News contributor, chief political correspondent for the Conservative Review. Do you agree with Janine? And what's going on? Why is all of this happening in our country?
Well, listen, it was a massive tragedy that happened, and everyone is responding emotionally when they're screaming for more gun laws. Listen, more gun laws will embolden the criminals and harms law-abiding citizens. I own not one but 2 guns because my home was broken into years ago. I want to be able to defend myself. Yeah. And what about Chicago? I don't hear anyone screaming about the crime, the gun violence that's happening in Chicago. No one's really talking about that. And they have stricter gun laws in Chicago. Yeah. So clearly, more gun laws do not work.
Real quickly, there are 2 of you I haven't talked to. Tammy, what are your thoughts?
Well, first, how dare Hillary Clinton? This is the division that Americans are rejecting. All of us want this to end. Republican, Democrat, white, black, gay, straight, doesn't matter. We're Americans first. And she's out there with such close proximity to such a horrible tragedy, accusing an entire group of people about being complicit. We reject that. It is obscene and it's ghoulish. And in the meantime, to what Deneen has noted, Chicago hit 500 murders for 2007 at the end of last month. In the midst of all this gun control, it's never returned to the issues what are going on there, the gangs, the drugs, et cetera, because then they'd have to admit that this is a failed operation, and yet that is what she continues to push and then effectively calls all the rest of us complicit in murder. We are against that, and we're for the solving of this problem, as all Americans are.
Says the independent radio talk show host. Really quickly, Rebecca Grant on the front row, national security analyst. Do you agree with Tammy?
I do. This is a week for mourning and for reflection. And when we get through this, I'd like to not hear anybody this week say political party in connection with this issue. Then let's go forward and ask, what can we do with gun control to help deter? Is there anything we can do? We've got to protect that Second Amendment. The Supreme Court will be looking at that as well. So we need to advance this conversation by saying, is there something we can do to deter? Because look at it, honestly, government cannot prevent a crazy sick man and the kind of things that we saw happen in Las Vegas. There are some things the government just can't do.
I know. Going into the holiday season, all of these families are going to be without their loved ones. It just breaks all of our hearts. And you're right, we need to come together as a country. Thank you all for being here. Great, important discussion.